Welcome back. State Treasurer Tobias Read wants to be your next Secretary of State. The Beaverton resident is a former state legislator who served on the Ways and Means Committee, has worked for 2 Treasury secretaries, worked for Nike, and ran for governor in the last cycle, losing the Democratic nomination of current Governor Tina Kotek. Tobias Read, welcome back to Eye on Northwest Politics.
Thanks, Ken. Glad to be here.
Okay, well, you already ran for governor once. Now you're running for Secretary of State. Do you see running for this position as maybe another pathway to get back into the governor's race in the future?
What I see is a need to restore confidence and accountability to the Secretary of State's office. This is an office that is just so essential to everything we do in state government. And I want to make sure that people know their voices and their votes count and are valued, that audits are professionally run, that we have a sense of professionalism and stability in that office. That's what I built at the State Treasury. That's the approach I want to bring to the Secretary of State's office.
So you're not answering the question about whether you would run for governor in the future. You're just talking about what's ahead of you right now.
Exactly. I see a need and I want to be of help. I think the stuff that we've done at Treasury has demonstrated what can happen when you run an agency with accountability and transparency, professionalism. That's what we need in the Secretary of State's office. I've learned I've learned the hard way that it's most important to think about what's immediately in front and where you can do the most good right now.
Shemia Fagan resigned as Secretary of State after she was found to have a lucrative consulting contract with Lamota Cannabis, one of the state's largest cannabis retailers, which her office happened to be auditing at the time. She did recuse herself from that audit. What did you think about the Shemia Fagan situation? How did that hit you?
I was just really disappointed, and it underscores for me how we have to have high standards for ourselves. Those of us who have the honor of serving an elected office have to remember that we work for voters. We have to operate at that level and with that clear understanding, bringing a clear sense of priority, of accountability, of professionalism and competence to these offices is essential. And that's what I want to be focused on in this race and as Secretary of State.
One of the issues that arose during that time was Fagan's salary, $77,000 a year, which is your salary as treasurer as well. Do you think state executives should get higher salaries? It seems like the Secretary of State of a state as large as Oregon should get more than $77,000 a year.
Well, I'm definitely not running because of the salary. I'm running because there's a need here, and I care about this state. I have invested a lot of my time, and I want it to be the sort of place that I want to grow old in, and that our kids and all Oregon kids have a future in. The motivation for me is not about money. It's about serving the state and bringing a sense of accountability, competence, and stability to the office.
Well, in general, don't you think that state executives in Oregon should get paid more than what those salaries are now?
There's no question that our statewide officers stack up pretty low when compared to the rest of state offices around the country. And you could certainly make a case that there would be more talented people who would consider running for office if the salary were a bit higher. It might well be a good investment. And I'm glad that conversation is happening in the legislature. The referral that they sent to voters to set up a commission that would review those salaries seems to me to be a sensible step.
Deputy Secretary of State Cheryl Myers stepped in right after Fagan resigned. Now Lavon Griffin-Valade is holding down the fort. What do you think it will take to bring stability back to that office, especially among leadership?
I think it's really a matter of setting priorities clearly, of making it an understood expectation that we operate with those standards in place, that we run audits in a professional way, that elections are administered fairly, that no one has special access or special treatment. And I think that's essential. The current Secretary of State is well situated to bring that approach. She's indicated that she does not plan to run, and that's why I want to bring the experience and the skills that I've had at the Treasury into the Secretary of State's office.
The legislature did approve an ambitious budget this year, focusing on education and homeless solutions. We've still got a couple of $1 billion in reserve funds, as I understand it. So how is our financial situation in Oregon right now, and do you have any concerns about where we're situated?
I always have concerns. That's part of my job as treasurer. I think the legislature has always faced a number of tough challenges. The needs and wants almost always exceed our means, and so the challenge is to balance both short-term and long-term. I think the legislature did some notable and laudable things when it comes to housing, to education, higher education included. But I do always worry about whether we have adequate reserves for what might be coming. There's an old joke about economists correctly predicting 7 of the last 3 recessions, but there is always that risk. And we do well when we put ourselves in a position to absorb those downturns, both from a budget perspective and the effect that it has on our credit rating. That's to be remembered as well.
How much do we have in reserve now?
We have a lot between the Education Stability Fund and the General Purpose Rainy Day Fund, both of which have statutory and constitutional caps. But you always want to have more, and it is that balance. So I think your numbers are right in the couple $2 billion range, but we have to think about what downturns might be coming, what needs are there, the risks from everything. It includes wildfires, for example. Every year there's the potential of costs that are not adequately anticipated and forecast.
In Oregon, if projected revenues are forecasted to be at least 2% above projections, we taxpayers get that money back in what's called a kicker. The kicker is kicked in this time around. So how much money are we getting back next year when we file our taxes?
More money than any kicker before. And the kicker does do a good thing in that it prevents us from spending money that we can't count on. But this speaks to the conversation we've been having just now about whether that is adequately accounting for the need for reserve funds. And I think that's a conversation that we've had for years in Oregon. We'll need to continue having about how to balance those short and long-term needs.
Any idea what the average taxpayer, and of course this will vary, but what the average taxpayer in Oregon will get back in terms of kicker?
I don't have it in front of me, but the thing to remember about the way the kicker works is that it's a direct reflection of how much tax a person has paid. So the average and the median are probably pretty different. It is very heavily weighted to upper income Oregonians. So the average may be a little bit deceptive. There are people at a very high level that will be pretty far from the average. It's not life-changing kind of money typically, but that's a number that is calculated. I don't have it in front of my head at the moment.
Okay, but you say it's the biggest one that we've ever had. So for those who have gotten kickers before, just add some more money to that, and that's what it will be.
And it comes as a credit, as you remember, not
Right.
as a check that will be applied to next year's tax returns.
State Treasurer and candidate for Oregon Secretary of State Tobias Read, thank you for joining us on Eye on Northwest Politics again.
Thank you, Ken.